It's not pleasant for them anymore, folks. It's not pleasant for them anymore. That's a bad group. Not pleasant for MS-13. Get them the hell out of here, right?
If you come into this country illegally, you have committed a crime.
At 5:12 a.m. on the east side of Charlotte, the streets were still, with early smoke hanging low beneath the streetlights. A reinforced door splintered apart as an ICE breaching team hit it with a controlled blast, sending dust and debris into the hallway. Across the district, DHS agents stormed a row of aging motel rooms, their tactical lights slicing through broken frames and drifting smoke. The sudden impact of boots, radios, and metal tools echoed through otherwise silent neighborhoods, turning still streets into active federal scenes in a matter of seconds. Above the rooftops, a helicopter moved without lights, holding a low orbit, while a thermal drone scanned narrow alleys for fleeing suspects. In the parking lot below, FBI vehicles slid into position, blocking escape routes as teams advanced towards suspected MS-13 safe houses identified during weeks of surveillance. This was not a simple document check or routine patrol. This was the opening strike of a coordinated federal operation aimed at dismantling one of the most violent MS-13 networks operating in the Southeast. Stay with military power, and if you want to follow how deep this operation goes, like and subscribe so you never miss the next move. The raids spread across Charlotte like a chain reaction. Only minutes after the first door was breached, new reports flowed into the command center as ICE, DHS, and FBI teams struck one location after another. The city was still half asleep, but the operation was already moving at full speed. Apartment blocks, low-cost motels, and scattered rental houses became sudden flashpoints as federal agents pushed through doors, cleared hallways, and secured rooms before suspects could escape. What looked calm from the outside was turning into a maze of tactical movements inside. The first significant breakthrough came from an older apartment complex near Central Avenue. A team of ICE officers advanced through the second-floor corridor, scanning each door for thermal signatures picked up earlier by a drone circling overhead. When they reached a particular unit, the readings showed multiple heat sources moving quickly inside. The officers exchanged brief hand signals, positioned the breaching tool, and drove it forward with a single heavy strike. The door collapsed inward, and the room erupted into chaos. Two MS-13 members inside were already reaching for a pile of clothes on the bed, where a loaded handgun was later recovered. One suspect lunged toward the kitchen, while the other aimed for the window, hoping to slip out into the narrow service alley behind the building. The officers cornered the first man within seconds, pinning him against the counter. The second suspect managed to shove the window fully open, climbing halfway out before a DHS agent grabbed his leg and pulled him back. A noisy struggle followed, the suspect kicking wildly as shards of glass broke under his weight. By the time the team secured the room, both men were cuffed on the floor, surrounded by burner phones, cash, and notebooks filled with coded markings often linked to MS-13. Just as the officers radioed the update, another team encountered a more dangerous situation at a nearby motel. Now, a suspect inside one of the rooms tried to escape by pushing a dresser against the door to delay the entry. When the agents forced their way in, he sprinted toward the bathroom window and jumped from the second floor. The fall slowed him, but he still tried to run across the parking lot. It was only when a group of FBI agents cut across from the far side of the building that he was finally caught. A search of the motel room revealed a second suspect, hiding under a mattress platform, along with 2 long knives and a modified handgun. Across the city, the pattern repeated. Every raid uncovered new information, new connections, or new reasons to push harder. Some suspects tried to flee in vehicles, speeding through narrow residential streets in an attempt to break the perimeter. One car reversed aggressively toward a DHS officer, forcing him to roll aside as the bumper scraped past. The driver made it only a few yards before an unmarked SUV blocked the exit, trapping the vehicle between a guardrail and a parked van. The suspect was pulled out and restrained while officers recovered another weapon from under the seat. What made these early takedowns so significant was not the number of arrests, but the profile of the individuals involved. Many had prior records for assault, firearm violations, or drug trafficking. Several had been deported previously, but re-entered the country unlawfully, using Charlotte as a safe zone to rebuild ties with their gang networks. The intelligence gathered before the operation had already suggested that MS-13 elements were blending into the city's rental corridors and transient motels, but the reality inside each room confirmed the extent of their presence. As analysts at the mobile command post began processing the first wave of recovered devices and documents, patterns emerged quickly. Names repeated across notebooks, locations circled on crude hand-drawn maps, contact lists with numbers traced to phones seized in earlier cases. All of it pointed to more targets scattered across the region and hinted at a larger structure beneath the surface. The significance of this first breakthrough became clear. The operation was no longer about rounding up individuals. It was about pushing into an organized network that had quietly taken root. Even before sunrise, reports continued flowing in from the field. Additional arrests, attempts to flee, and pockets of resistance appeared in every direction. But with every suspect detained, the officers gained another piece of the puzzle. The pace of the operation did not slow, it intensified. And if the early moments of the raid had revealed anything, it was that the situation in Charlotte was far deeper than anyone expected. If you're still with military power, stay close, because what comes next will expose just how wide this network truly is. While agents in the field continued to secure suspects and clear locations, the real turning point of the operation was taking shape miles away inside a temporary federal command post. Rows of mobile data stations were packed with analysts from DHS, ICE, and the FBI, all working quickly to process the phones, ledgers, SIM cards, and laptops recovered during the first wave of raids. What looked, at first, like scattered arrests across Charlotte began to transform into a coherent pattern as the data flowed in. The earliest signals came from the phones seized during the apartment raid on Central Avenue. Officers handed them over while the units were still warm from being in the suspects' pockets. Analysts immediately connected each device to digital forensics tools, pulling out contact lists, call logs, and GPS fragments. Within minutes, the monitors lit up with clusters of locations across the city. These were not random addresses. The dots formed a visible arc along transit corridors, low-cost rental zones, and motel clusters known for high turnover. It was the first confirmation that Charlotte had been more than a shelter. It had been a strategic, safe zone. The deeper the analysts searched, the more the structure revealed itself. One set of numbers extracted from a burner phone matched a list previously tied to a separate MS-13 case in Maryland. Another device contained partially deleted messages mentioning drop-offs, room numbers, and coded references that often pointed to safe houses or temporary holding points. When these were mapped, the digital outline of a network began to form across the screen. Each address flagged earlier by drone surveillance connected to at least one other location. Some linked to people arrested during earlier operations in nearby counties. Others led to names already known by border enforcement. But the most revealing discovery came when analysts cross-referenced fingerprints captured during intake. Several of the early detainees had been deported before, some more than once. Their criminal histories included aggravated assault, weapons charges, and drug trafficking. Yet they had managed to return to the United States through remote crossing points along the southern border, bypassing major checkpoints and rejoining their networks in cities like Charlotte. The realization hit the room with cold clarity. This wasn't a scattered group hiding in random apartments. It was a circulation loop. Individuals moving in and out, regrouping in a city that offered anonymity, mobility, and cover. At the same time, drones operating above the raid sites recorded heat signatures from nearby structures. When analysts compared these images to property records, they identified several homes rented under aliases or with cash payments. One house showed signs of frequent nighttime activity, but no vehicles were registered to the address. Another property had 3 electricity spikes over the last week, indicating large gatherings or equipment use inside. Each detail added weight to a larger picture. These were not simply living spaces, they were logistical points, places to store equipment, rotate personnel, and move money. As the analysts layered the findings onto a citywide map, the outlines of a support network emerged. Safe houses stretching across several neighborhoods, transit routes used for movement between counties, and communication channels linking Charlotte to smaller towns just outside the metropolitan region. The pattern resembled the early stages of a hub-and-spoke structure, something commonly identified in transnational gang models, where a central city provides cover and side routes feed into it from different directions. A sudden alert from the forensics team added another layer. A laptop taken from one of the motel rooms contained drafts of travel logs with coded initials and dates. Even without full decryption, specialists recognized the structure. This was planning, not routine communication. It suggested that members were being cycled through Charlotte on designated timelines, possibly as part of a larger operational framework extending beyond North Carolina. Meanwhile, concurrent interviews with several detainees provided fragments that matched the digital evidence. No single person offered a full picture, but each detail confirmed something already found: locations used repeatedly, short-term rentals paid in cash, and the presence of individuals known to have moved across states within the last month. The more pieces analysts added, the more Charlotte looked like a waypoint in a broader movement, not a simple hideout. By the time the sun began to rise, the command center no longer viewed the raids as isolated hits. The operation had broken open a functioning network, one that extended into transportation, housing, communication, and cross-state links. The early morning's arrests were only the surface. What they uncovered wasn't a cluster of suspects, it was a system. By the time dawn edged into Charlotte, the operation had already reached a new level of intensity. At 5:03 a.m., the command center issued the synchronized order that agents had spent weeks preparing for. 14 high-priority locations were marked, vetted, and mapped. Each team was already in position. All that remained was the countdown. When the signal came through, the federal strike moved with a level of precision that made the entire city feel as if it had been locked into a tactical grid. Within the first minute, a DHS entry team hit a cluster of townhomes near Independence Boulevard. The door to the central unit collapsed under a hydraulic ram, and the agents surged inside as a helicopter hovered overhead, with its FLIR camera scanning the nearby streets. From that vantage point, operators could see individuals slipping between backyard fences, attempting to flee before the perimeter tightened. Thermal readings marked each heat signature, guiding ground teams toward the movement. Simultaneously, ICE officers advanced on a small compound behind a commercial strip. The building looked quiet from the outside, but drone footage captured unusual activity in the hours before the strike. When the agents forced entry, several suspects barricaded themselves behind overturned furniture. The standoff lasted only moments. Officers cleared the living room and hallway with controlled movements, detaining 3 suspects and seizing another set of burner phones, a sawed-off shotgun, and coded documents linking the group to earlier raids. 2 miles east, FBI agents approached a double-wide trailer hidden behind a row of abandoned sheds. As they moved in, a suspect inside attempted to escape in an aging sedan. The driver accelerated so abruptly that dirt flew into the air in a wide arc. Instead of breaking through the federal blockade, he swerved into the opposite lane and collided with a set of trash bins. The impact stalled the vehicle long enough for agents to surround it. A search later revealed another weapon hidden in the engine compartment, wrapped in cloth to disguise its heat signature. At nearly the same moment, another team encountered a more violent response on the outskirts of town. When DHS agents breached the entrance of a converted garage, the suspects inside resisted with improvised barricades and attempted to push back using metal poles and makeshift shields. The confrontation drew in backup support, and within minutes the structure was secured. Equipment inside the garage suggested the site had been used as a small staging point. Tools, spare vehicle parts, and handwritten notes with street names circled in heavy pencil. As the synchronized hits continued, helicopters expanded their surveillance pattern. From above, Charlotte resembled a shifting mosaic of thermal readings, vehicle movements, and flashing tactical lights. Drones tracked suspects who tried to flee through wooded areas behind suburban homes, sending real-time coordinates to teams in unmarked SUVs. One pair of suspects attempted to outrun agents by darting into a shallow creek that fed into Briar Creek. The drone caught their heat signatures through the tree cover, and ground units intercepted them along a narrow footpath minutes later. The outer edges of the city saw their own waves of action. Farther north, a rural address, flagged during the analysis phase, turned out to be a rest point for individuals moving between counties. When the team arrived, they found doors unlocked and blankets spread across the floor, as if the occupants had left in haste. Tire tracks outside indicated that a vehicle had departed only minutes before, and agents widened the search area to nearby side roads. The discovery reinforced what analysts had already suspected. Charlotte was a hub, but the network extended into smaller towns and rural spaces in every direction. As the strike progressed, every successful entry produced additional information. More names, more addresses, more signs of coordination. The operation no longer felt like a series of raids, it felt like a controlled dismantling. By the second morning of the mission, the scale of the offensive became undeniable. DHS tallied the cumulative results. 207 individuals detained, many with serious criminal histories or gang affiliations, and several more tied to cross-state activity uncovered during the mapping effort. The momentum of the operation continued to rise, not fall, pushing federal teams to widen their search and prepare follow-up actions in the surrounding counties. If you're still here, you're watching a federal offensive unfold. As the last helicopters pulled away from Charlotte and the final arrest teams checked out of their positions, the operation shifted from noise to silence. Streets that had echoed with forceful entry and rushing vehicles now looked almost unchanged, yet the weight of what had happened lingered in every neighborhood touched by the raids. This was the moment where the mission moved from confrontation to understanding, where the evidence collected would reveal the size of the network hiding inside the city. Inside a secured federal processing site, agents arranged the seized items across long tables. Phones, notebooks, SIM cards, cash bundles, and modified weapons lay side by side, forming a rough outline of the group's operations. Analysts from DHS, ICE, and the FBI began sorting the devices, pulling fragments of data while matching names, dates, and properties already flagged during surveillance. The early patterns told a clear story. Charlotte had been functioning as more than a hideout. It was a waypoint for movement across North Carolina and beyond. The first confirmed link came from low-cost phones recovered at 2 motels struck during the coordinated raids. Their partial data revealed repeated contact with numbers in neighboring counties. When mapped, those calls aligned with travel routes already suspected during the analysis phase. It showed that individuals were being moved through Charlotte on predictable cycles, arriving, regrouping, and leaving again. A laptop seized from a rental home added another layer. Instead of personal files, it contained coded schedules referencing initials, dates, and stops. Even with incomplete decryption, analysts recognized a rotation model. People were not living in Charlotte, they were passing through it. Safe houses were not shelters, they were stepping stones. Other evidence pointed toward deeper regional ties. Notebooks from a converted garage contained symbols associated with MS-13 subgroups coordinating across state lines. Several detained suspects had previously been removed from the country for violent crimes, only to cross the border again through remote areas and reconnect with their network. These findings reshaped the understanding of the operation. The suspects were not loosely connected. They were part of a structured flow. As the analysts layered property records, GPS fragments, and recovered messages onto a digital map, the structure finally came into view. a spread of safe houses, motels, and rural shelters linking Charlotte to surrounding counties. The city acted as a central hub, feeding into smaller towns and drawing from them in return. By late afternoon, it was clear that the raids had struck the right targets, but only one segment of a wider system. Charlotte had been disrupted, but the network stretched further, and the mission would not end within city limits. What they decoded next would push the operation into its next phase. When the raids ended, Charlotte fell into an uneasy silence. Tactical vehicles withdrew, helicopters lifted away, and the chaos of the morning gave way to a city trying to understand what had just unfolded. Residents stepped outside cautiously, some shaken, others quietly relieved. A few protests formed near community centers, but in many neighborhoods the mood was more subdued. People had long suspected certain houses, motels, and garages were not what they seemed, and the sudden federal presence confirmed what many had felt, but never said. Inside the temporary command post, agents began the second phase of the operation. Every property linked to the arrest was inspected again, room by room. Some locations were nearly empty, set up for short stays. Others showed signs of deeper activity. Storage bins, improvised bedding, communication notes, and rotating groups of occupants. These were not random hideouts. They were safe houses that kept the network alive. Removing them was part of the cleanup, a necessary step to stop the group from regrouping inside the city. City officials met with DHS, ICE, and the FBI to manage concerns from the public. The message was steady. The operation targeted individuals with violent records, known gang ties, or repeated unlawful entry. The arrests were not broad sweeps. They were precise actions against people who had used Charlotte as a logistical hub for movement across the region. Throughout the afternoon, more connections emerged. Several suspects detained in Charlotte had ties to other cities in North Carolina and beyond. Their movements matched routes identified from seized phones and laptops, reinforcing the picture that the city was only one part of a larger chain. By evening, Charlotte was calm again, but the mission had made one thing clear. Removing the suspects was only the first step. Dismantling the network would require going far beyond the city limits. Charlotte was only the beginning. The arrests, the safe house dismantling, and the intelligence recovered now point to a wider question. What happens next when a network this large is exposed? The city has been cleared, but the routes uncovered by analysts stretch far beyond Mecklenburg County. Patterns traced from seized phones show movement toward Raleigh, Greensboro, and even neighboring states, suggesting that the network relied on multiple cities working together in silence. For the United States, the lesson is clear. Criminal organizations adapt quickly, shifting their operations the moment pressure rises, but the strength of federal law enforcement is the ability to respond faster, combining intelligence, coordination, and overwhelming precision to protect communities before threats expand. Operations like the one in Charlotte show how the country defends itself, not only at its borders, but deep inside its cities. In moments like these, every American becomes part of the bigger picture. Staying informed, staying aware, and supporting the institutions that hold the line is how national security endures. If you stand with America's defenders and believe in the strength of this country, like this video, share your thoughts below, and subscribe to Military Power so you never miss the next mission. What comes next will shape the battles ahead.